Now I'm going to tweet it right now. It has been tweeted, and you can retweet it.
Okay, okay, here we go. I see it now. Okay, done. Right. Okay.
Okay, so here we are. Exciting times.
Yes.
We are less than 72 hours away from the big day.
Right.
I'm coming at you live from Hendersonville, North Carolina.
And this is Cathy Young in Middletown, New Jersey.
Okay. Yes, You can tell how professional a production this is because I never even bothered to introduce anyone.
Okay. Okay. Well,
yeah. So I'm in.
Just myself,
That's your prerogative, certainly. So I'm in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Spent the day in Asheville, which was a really excellent little city, and I kind of want to move there now. But that's for another.
Okay.
That's for another. That's for another discussion.
The only place where I've been in North Carolina is Durham. I spoke at the university a few years ago. It was really nice. I really liked it over there. But.
Yeah, this is in the far western portion of the state, so it's pretty different from Raleigh-Durham area. I think the only real I mean, I've passed through the state a number of times, but the only real substantial time I've ever spent in North Carolina prior to this trip was for the Democratic Convention in 2012, which was in Charlotte.
Okay.
And but that's neither here nor there. So I guess as a way to sort of set off the conversation, something I've been thinking about and I wanted to run past you, because I know this is something you've been, let's say, immersed in, or you've discussed pretty frequently, is has to do with the alt-right, but let's not get into like the same old kind of cliched alt-right discussion. What I've been thinking about is, so I've been traveling around for the past week now in some areas of Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, North Carolina that are disproportionately favorable toward Trump.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I do that is because I feel a lot of journalists and commentators and people in the punditocracy have had their views of who constitutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, 1 second. Я сейчас как раз, я пыталась тебе звонить, все занято, я на своей передаче, так что... Ну, я приехала, да. Okay, that was me speaking Russian, by the way, so now you can spin a whole conspiracy theory around that.
Yeah, I was going to say, that must have been Putin handing down his discussion, his dictates, right?
Personal instructions from Vladimir.
Okay.
Actually, that was my mom.
Tell him I'm still waiting for my check to arrive.
Okay. Okay.
So that's a funny. Okay, so I've been in these areas that are heavily will vote for Trump heavily in all likelihood, and something that's always that strikes me, and which would strike anyone, I think, if they were in a similar position, talking to people who are disposed favorably to Trump, and being in areas where there's a heavy concentration of those sorts of people, is you sort of bristle at the popular depiction of who the prototypical Trump supporter is. And I think a reason why that depiction is so skewed is because a lot of people who spend all day on Twitter.
Right, they don't want the typical Trump supporter on Twitter with the anime avatar and the swastika and whatnot.
Yeah, and that just I'll be honest, I spend a lot of my day on Twitter too, so I'm not saying that's inherently bad. I'm just saying it's that people who have a limited conception or people whose conception of this phenomenon is largely limited to Twitter.
Yeah, no, I realize that that's not a totally accurate depiction of who the Trump voter is. Yeah. So
That leads to the question. I mean, do you think that element of the Trump support, such as it exists, whatever percentage it might be, do you think that element has been overemphasized in the popular media depiction at the expense of what could be a more, I don't know, comprehensive, analytical understanding of what constitutes Trump support?
Well, probably to some extent, if only because, I mean, I think that everything that happens on Twitter gets a really disproportionate amount of attention. I mean, there's a whole genre of stories in the media and all sorts of topics that basically consists of, oh, look, here's some horrible person saying something really horrible on Twitter, and somehow we're supposed to find that newsworthy. I mean, that's a genre that I would really like to see, in steep decline. But I think it has been overemphasized, probably to some extent. I don't think there's been a complete absence of coverage of people who are Trump supporters in real life. Certainly, I think the white working class has gotten its share of attention. I think that there may have been. I mean, if anything, I think there's been a lack of interest in sort of the more offbeat, kind of off the beaten track, groups of Trump supporters who are neither on Twitter nor the white working class. I mean, for instance, there's apparently, we saw the other day, there's a portion of the Hindu community that is extremely pro-Trump, and I think partly that's because of the kind of historical tensions between Muslims and Hindus. I think it kind of plays into that. I know personally that there is a fair number of Russian Jewish immigrants, especially the older people, who are very, very pro-Trump, or at the very least, who are planning to vote for Trump because they don't like Hillary and they don't like Obama. So I think that's something I really haven't seen, anything about. So, but I do think that this phenomenon of the alt-right, these Trump brigades on Twitter, it's a sufficiently new and kind of startling thing. And I think, I mean, the fact that there's this group of people that is kind of openly openly racist, anti-Semitic rhetoric into what is supposed to be kind of mainstream discussion, I think that is really startling to a lot of people. I mean, I will give you a really interesting example. In my mailbox the other day, not on Twitter, but in my Gmail account, I get an email from a PR person saying that Jared Taylor of American Renaissance, which is a kind of veteran racist outfit that is really pretty much openly promoting white supremacy, is going to be available on Tuesday night for commentary on the election and specifically on Donald Trump and the alt-right. Now, it is really not standard, and I think you would agree with me as a journalist, for journalists to get emails from PR people on the eve of the election, offering commentary from the head of a white supremacist group. I mean, and that I think is something that, that's unusual. And I think that is something that really, draws attention to this phenomenon. Now, I do want to say, I mean, I've seen people refer to Trump as a white nationalist. I think that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, I don't really think he is anything ideologically. I mean, I've said before, I think he's a Trumpist, I mean, I think his ideology is the, personal elevation of Donald Trump. I think that it is interesting that it has galvanized this, very marginalized community of people who really do hold these, racist, xenophobic views, and I think that is a legitimate phenomenon to discuss. So,
but here's why. I mean, who is to blame for the fact that Jared Taylor is now being promoted by public relations entities? I don't know who exactly,
right?
Sent you that email, but who do we blame for that? Well,
I could go and check now. But
yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter. But the point is that people like Kim are being sought out because there is a dearth of people who can competently discuss the alt-right without getting into hyperbole or exaggerating its influence or that sort of thing. So because of that.
So you're saying that it's sort of the mainstream liberal media and to some extent the Hillary Clinton campaign have promoted.
Yeah, I remember who elevated the alt-right and who to some degree reified them as a tangible group. Hillary Clinton. She devoted an entire speech.
You know what? Well, I'm going to disagree with you.
Actually. But let me just finish the thought. She reified the. I mean, here's what I think. I wrote a piece about to this effect at the time. She reified the alt-right. And what does it mean to reify something? It means to take something that is an abstraction or something that maybe isn't a fully formed unit and kind of insert it into the realm of the tangible. And I think she did that by exalting the alt-right as the force that she was positioning herself against. She sort of made a real force just in doing that because obviously the nominee of one of the major parties in the country, identifying an enemy is going to embolden that enemy, and it's going to, add strength to that enemy. Now, that's not to say that the alt-right didn't exist, but it wasn't a coherent, and it still might not be a coherent unit. She made it more coherent with that address, I think.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that it definitely boosted the visibility of the alt-right. I think I'm not even sure that it particularly, caused it to gel more than it had before. Because I mean, I will tell you the history of, the alt-right phenomenon as part of the election, the way that I personally experienced it, which is that, as I recall, in the fall of, approximately a year ago, a little more than a year ago. This conservative hashtag started showing up. And at the time, it was something that was happening within the debate around Republican primaries. So it was really about the alt-right kind of targeting mainstream conservatives like Marco Rubio, like Jeb Bush, like Ted Cruz. So it started out really as a kind of within, internecine fight within the conservative movement. And suddenly they were targeting people from National Review, especially Jews, Jonah Goldberg, also, David French was not Jewish, who was targeted along with his wife. And, they were very visible because they were targeting people in these really kind of crude and horrible ways, sending them, like David French was sent, pornographic collages of his wife being sexually penetrated by a black man, that kind of stuff. They were targeting, they were targeting Ben Shapiro was another guy who you probably heard of, who was kind of you haven't heard about this? Yeah, he's an ex-Breitbart guy.
I know all about this. I mean, I think
there was that phenomenon, and they were also being kind of mainstream for a long time by Breitbart. I mean, I think that Breitbart, and I don't want to start, demonizing Breitbart here, but I mean, they certainly played a role in this.
No, I mean, they're worthy of demonization. It's purveyors of sludge.
Did a piece, Marla Annapolis and Alan Bakari did a piece in March that was kind of, I mean, I think that was the piece, if anything, that kind of propelled the alt-right to more visibility, because by that time people were paying a lot of attention to Breitbart, and suddenly
a piece, like some random piece on Breitbart, which really at the end of the day, few people are going to read in the grand scheme of things, doesn't compare in terms of the reification effect that it might have to Hillary Clinton exalting this force as the main enemy that she wants to position herself against. Because remember, she was trying to make entreaties to moderate Republicans, so quote unquote, to say, hey, I'm your candidate too. You don't want to be associated with these kind of virulent Trump people, Trump trolls on the internet. Therefore, come to me, which was a strategically stupid tack to take.
Yeah,
I don't think it's
maybe,
worked.
but that was one speech. I mean, she hasn't. It's not really like she's
But
gone
it's
out
no,
there and
it's been a
constantly
theme. I mean,
raising
she's
Trump.
but she mentioned it. I mean, it was one speech, but it was a major it was a foundational moment. I mean, a speech can have a major effect if it has some kind of specific
Right.
resonance to it. And she mentioned the alt right by name in that speech. I mean,
Yeah, I know, I know, I know.
it wasn't just a insinuation. It was a explicit
Right.
attack.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I'm not sure that it was a smart thing to do, like if I was advising Hillary, which I'm not, by the way, in case anyone has any suspicion about that. And I'm gonna vote for Gary Johnson, as I've said before. I kind of hesitated a little bit after the Aleppo moment, but it's really not like it's gonna make a huge difference here in New Jersey anyway. So anyway, I was gonna say, yeah. Okay, so it was really not a very smart thing to do. I will agree with you. It drew more attention to them. I don't really, I mean, at least from where I stand, I don't think it radically changed things. I mean, I think it was really more kind of, yeah, they started getting more attention, but at least from where I stand, and maybe that's because they were in my kind of on my radar screen before that, but they were getting a lot of attention, for instance, because they were targeting, again, before the Hillary Clinton speech, there were stories in the mainstream media about, Jewish reporters like Julia Yaffe being targeted.
okay, I mean, I hear that incident cited over and over again, and I'm sure she got a barrage of nasty comments, right? But a reporter getting nasty comments, and maybe some that are anti-Semitic or racist or however you want to characterize them. Let's grant that she did get those comments and that they were
Right.
deplorable, right?
Yeah.
Whenever I use the word deplorable now, it has this extra significance. But let's say that they were deplorable, the messages she got. The idea that should be so like that's a major national crisis for one reporter to get a bunch of mean comments. Should that play such an outsized role in the national, in the popular imagination? I mean, like you have to get over it at some point. I mean,
Okay,
everybody who has a significant profile on the internet gets an onslaught of nasty comments every single day. So I mean,
right.
yeah, it's bad, but it's not. It doesn't. It's not like this like politically consequential thing that everybody has to be deeply concerned about. I don't think.
Okay, well, allow me to disagree here because, yeah, I mean, everyone gets nasty comments. I've gotten them, you've gotten them, I'm sure. When it starts to be like nasty comments with, like, one thing that she got, for instance, was an email that had like a graphic of a Jewish man being shot in the head by a Nazi, with some sort of commentary along the lines of, this is what's going to happen to you, which prompted her to file a police report about a threat. Now, I will say, yeah, like, is that a serious cause for concern about being assassinated?
Okay, but we have no. I mean, this kind of stuff has been going on for as long as the internet has been in existence. I mean,
Well, no, look, I kind of disagree with you because I think the amount, and I mean, look,
because because she's in the public eye, so she's of course she's going to get more of it. Look, I'm not defending it in any sense. It's gross to get that kind of imagery in your email inbox, but it's not like.
I mean, look, I don't think that there has ever been, up until now.
And we don't even know who sent that thing. It could have been anybody. It could have.
No, hang on. Let me just finish my point. I mean, I don't think that there has been, like, prior to this campaign, I don't think there's ever been an even remotely similar volume of specifically anti-Semitic threats, or anti-Semitic, abusive messages. Not all of them are necessarily threats, going to Jewish journalists. I mean, sure, there may have been an occasional one. I've gotten a few in, over the years that I've been working as a journalist. But it's a difference between getting this kind of stuff, getting 3 or 4 of those a year and getting like 40 a day. I mean, I think there is difference. And someone is telling
Okay,
me
yeah, I mean,
that
there's a numerical difference there, but like, I mean, the reason why I even brought this up because like Julie Ioffe, who I'm sure suffered greatly getting those emails, her experience now has to color how the entire commentariat views the Trump phenomenon. It's myopic. It's like it's an insignificant occurrence in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, it might be new, it might be worth commenting on for, but for it to have been so dominant, I think it's just it's vastly disproportionate, and it speaks to how this media chattering class is so inward looking, that they think that it has some like profound significance. It needs to be brought up constantly when it's like a 5-minute story that can be like noted and then moved on from.
Okay, hang on. First of all, someone is telling me that people cannot hear me on the broadcast. So, I mean, is there any way that you can turn up the sound or whatever? I don't know if there's anything that I should do at my end.
I can hear you.
Okay.
I just muted you, and now I'm going to unmute you. Hopefully that works. I can't unmute you somehow? This is crazy. Hold on. Okay, I just tried to mute you and then unmute you, and now I cannot unmute you. I don't know what to do here. Hold on a second. I don't know. Why can't I unmute you? This is so stupid. Like I have muted here and I can't unmute. Like I can't hear you right now because I muted you purposely to try to unmute you, and I can't unmute you now. Hold on. I know I can figure this out. Let me look up on my phone. What is going on here? Why can't I unmute you? Somebody tweet me and tell me how to unmute people in Google Hangouts. This is crazy. Hold on. That might have been a troll because I heard you fine for this whole conversation. The unmute is on top of the. Okay, can you just leave the hangout and come back? Can you do that? Okay, so I guess I'm still broadcasting here. She's gone, and should be back. I hope whoever said that to her was not just simply trolling, because that would be mean. So she should be returning soon. I think somebody said something that wasn't correct. I mean, I guess when we were talking over one another, you couldn't hear her. But when she was talking by herself, she could be heard, right? So that was stupid. I guess I'm going to send her another invite.
Okay, how's now?
Okay, I can hear you now. I think when we're talking over, hold on. I think when we're talking over one another, maybe my voice is more comes through more, but they can hear you. I mean, so that was silly.
All right.
Okay, so maybe that's a good time to
let's try to do a little less talking over each other.
Yeah.
All right.
So what was I going to say? So okay, so yeah,
you were talking about like, is the story of the okay. Well, let me tell you that, because I think one thing that kind of contributed to elevating the story is that Trump at one point in an interview was specifically asked, what do you think about the fact that some people who apparently are your supporters have been sending these, anti-Semitic death threats to a reporter who wrote a sort of not entirely flattering story about your wife. And his response was basically, well, I think her story was really awful, and so on and so forth. And then he was kind of pressed again on, well, what about the people who've been sending her these messages who are your fans? And his response was, well, I've got nothing to say to the fans. And a lot of people in the alt-right kind of took that to be a tacit signal of, okay, guys, I'm really, I'm with you, and, I'm not gonna say anything. So I
think okay. Well, let's just unpack that for a second. So a reporter asks Trump to comment on the fact that unknown people are on the internet. So we can't verify the identities of these people, right? So they could just be straight up trolls. They may not support Trump at all. We don't know. We can't confirm or verify their identity. But hold on. And so then the reporter deems that so significant that when they're in the presence of a presidential candidate, they're not going to ask about Yemen. They're not going to ask about the TPP. They're not going to ask about nuclear nonproliferation. They're going to ask about Julie Yoffe's emails. I mean, that speaks to the myopic quality of this. That's absurd.
I mean, I don't think that's the only thing he was asked about. I mean, okay, I disagree with you. I think that was an entirely legitimate question. I mean, I think that if if Hillary Clinton...
So if I were interviewing Hillary Clinton, it would be reasonable for me to say, "Hey, Hillary, a bunch of people who appear to be your supporters on Twitter have been mean to me, have sent me hostile images, have threatened me in various capacities. What do you have to say about that?" That would be a legitimate question to put to Hillary, because it's happened. It's just going to be true.
Well, let me tell you. Okay, look, if people who are critical of Hillary were on a regular basis getting threats that specifically focused on their ethnicity, or their religion, you don't think that would be I mean, if that was kind of a pattern of behavior that was happening, you don't think that would be a legitimate issue? I mean, I think it would be. I think it would be.
I mean, I guess it's just to elevate that as the main issue that animates your concern, I think is just wildly disproportionate. Ask him whatever you want, I guess, but to me, to have that as a priority is just ridiculous. And the fact that it was about Julia Offie, who had a thing about Melania Trump. I mean, that thing became a story unto itself that everybody thought was so amazingly important. I mean, if I wanted, I could go on a crusade and give updates every single day about the nasty stuff I get from Hillary supporters. But I don't do that because that would be myopic. It's something that impacts me tangentially, but it's not something that impacts the voters. It's not something I would ask Hillary about. I mean, it's egotistical, I think.
Well, look, I have written repeatedly that, I mean, I think the whole internet harassment narrative has been blown out of proportion. I still believe that. I think this is a little different given its volume and its consistency, and given that, again, it's been targeting like every single Jewish journalist specifically who has written critical about Trump. I mean, that's a phenomenon. Now, am I saying that Trump is in any way behind this? No, of course not. I mean, I think that he could have neutralized a lot of that if he had said straight away, if you're sending, pictures of Jews being shot in the head to Jewish journalists, I don't want your support. And I think he did eventually sort of say that. But if he had done that much sooner, I think it would have neutralized a lot of that. Also, and let me just finish my point, because I think, I mentioned Breitbart before, and you said, oh, who reads Breitbart? Well, currently the former head of Breitbart is the chief executive officer of the Trump campaign. So I think, it's been known for some time that Breitbart was kind of like the Pravda of the Trump campaign, basically. It was it's pretty huge in terms of traffic. It was, Breitbart was pushing the alt-right. This is not Hillary Clinton. This is not the mainstream media. This is, Breitbart was pushing the alt-right, and given that Breitbart is also connected to the Trump campaign, I think it was entirely legitimate for people to pay attention. So,
Yeah, I mean, I would never argue that it's illegitimate for people.
Sure, maybe, but
yeah, I don't think it's
illegitimate story.
I don't think it's an illegitimate story. I don't think it's an illegitimate story at all. I think Breitbart is absolute sludge. It has been for years and years. People try to say it's like that it's gone off the deep end in the past couple months or something, which is just totally bogus. It was absolute garbage. It was garbage when Breitbart himself was running it. It was conspiratorial. It was nasty. It was vicious.
I totally agree with you. Finally, there's something we agree on. I don't think it was ever all that. I think it has gotten worse, but I think it's a matter of degree as opposed to essential quality. I mean, I think the Shirley Sherrod story was disgraceful. So, I don't think there was ever a, good and, journalistically.
Well, I mean, it's obviously.
But I think, again, I think they contributed a lot to making it a story. So I think if we're going to talk about, who's responsible for elevating this, that's a big part of it. Milo Yiannopoulos is a big part of it.
Sure. I mean, they have responsibility for elevating it. I mean, that's obviously true. I mean, but that doesn't have to dictate the way that the pundit consensus frames the issue necessarily. They've bought into that framing. So I think they have culpability as well. And
I think they probably overplayed it.
Okay, so there we go. We agree. That's my point.
Okay, but I think we disagree about the degree to which they overplayed it and the degree of attention it should have gotten. But let me ask you a question. Okay, so here's a website. The website Vidar, right? It's basically.
Yeah, I know of it. Yeah, I'm not a regular reader, everybody. I'm not a regular reader, but I know of it, okay?
Okay. Well, it's an anti-immigrant website, anti-immigration website that runs a lot of, pretty transparently racist material. I mean, it's not as overtly racist as, the Stormfront or whatever, but it's pretty racist. It runs one of its columnists is this anti-Semitic nutcase who's, basically got this idea that, Jews have, as a group, have an evolutionary strategy of subverting, every majority culture that they live in to promote their own interests. And, Jews are the ones pushing integration and, open borders in the United States. They've got this really nutty side to them. And, they, from the very beginning, they were saying, oh, finally, we have found our candidate in Donald Trump. And, they were really, really, going to bat for him from the beginning when he got into the Republican primaries. And they were extremely active online. Now, are we paying too much attention to what goes on online? Maybe, but that's where a lot of the business is happening right now. So, is that a legitimate story? I think it kind of is, especially, given that Trump has retweeted some of their stuff.
Yeah, I've never
not be their stuff, but other groups that were tweet persons who have.
Yeah, I've never argued that it's an illegitimate story. Obviously, there are a segment of people. We can debate to what extent and in what numbers they exist, but they do exist, and they're online and they're active online, who are especially enlivened by Trump. It exists, and it will be legitimate to inquire as to why that might be the case.
Okay, well,
but my qualm has always been that it's been such a central feature of how journalists and pundits perceive Trump and the Trump phenomenon more broadly, to the extent that it's had a distorting effect, and it's caused them to misdiagnose what the features of the Trump phenomenon are. I mean, I think that would be of marginal interest to me to look at. I mean, because it would be notable, but I wouldn't say it's illegitimate. But I wouldn't assign it such outsized importance in the way that a lot of people who are professional opinion makers have done.
Right. Okay. Well, let me tell you something though that may kind of add a little nuance, to the question of how important that is. I was actually just the other day, I was at a Cato Institute event in New York, in which a pollster named Emily Akins, who's with Cato, was presenting her data on basically the breakdown of the priorities and views of different groups of people in the Republican primaries, like Trump voters versus, general GOP and, let's say Cruz, Rubio, and Bush voters. And one thing that she found, and I'm not really sure, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it was like there was a huge percentage of Trump supporters in the primaries who said, for instance, that ethnic and racial identity is highly important to them. Who said that immigrants of different racial backgrounds have a negative effect on the country. Who believe, for instance, that Muslims as a group are kind of incompatible with American democracy. So I mean, there is. Not all, but there is certainly a very substantial percentage of Trump voters, at least in the Republican primaries, who really, I mean, I'm not saying that they're all right. I'm certainly not saying that, they're sending anti-Semitic messages to Julia Yaffe or to Jonah Goldberg. But I mean, it does seem that there is a substantial portion of the score base of Trump voters that kind of, again, I want to be very careful. I don't want to say they're white nationalists, certainly, but who are sort of on the edge, maybe, of being white nationalists and who are sympathetic to, certain white nationalist issues. So, I mean, I really not downplay the significance of that. I mean, I think it's,
okay, yeah, I think that. Yeah, those people probably do exist. I don't know. I'd have to look at the methodology of this particular study. I haven't seen it. I mean, but it seems plausible to me.
Yeah, it's going to be on the Cato website. Unfortunately, they haven't put it up, pre-election. But
here's a broader issue as to why I think this is troubling. So here's leaving aside the particulars of the Trump support base, the impulse increasingly is to attribute the actions of and I think you would be sympathetic to this critique, based on your earlier writings and criticism.
Yeah,
is there's increasingly an impulse on the part of journalists, pundits, people in that sphere, to attribute the actions of random people on the internet whose origins are not immediately discernible with any degree of certainty, or whose true intentions are not immediately discernible. There's this impulse to saddle political enemies with the actions of those people. So this happened to Bernie Sanders. The circumstances were different.
Oh yeah.
But let me just finish the point. Let me finish the point.
Right.
So the Bernie Bro thing came about when certain people who were engaging in sort of trollish online activity and were perceived as pro-Bernie, they became this meme. The existence of the people became this meme in the pundit imagination, because they would be strenuously objecting often to what they thought of as inaccurate media coverage related to the candidate they supported. So then this became they became a Bernie Bro, and it escalated and escalated, and it became this self-reinforcing phenomenon. And it got to the point where journalists went to Bernie Sanders and said, "What do you think about the Bernie Bros?" I mean, like he's culpable somehow for random people on Reddit or Twitter saying mean things to journalists. So I mean, to me, that impulse to selectively cobble together examples of people being mean online and using that to disparage a presidential candidate and go and make him account for it, I think is a pernicious thing to have happened. And it's happened to Corbyn in the UK. So online harassment, and to what extent Corbyn himself was responsible for it, became a central issue in the Labour leadership election this year. And you see it manifesting in a different form with Trump. I mean, yeah, there are going to be differences in all those cases, right? But the impulse is still similar. I mean, do you think that impulse is problematic?
I agree. I mean, I've written about, as you may have seen, I've written in rebuttal of the Bernie Bros narrative. I had a piece about it in USA Today, actually. I will tell you that I think there are two differences. First of all, I've looked at the Bernie Bros narrative, and I've looked, very carefully at the alt-right stuff. And I think that there really was, I mean, there was a lot more meat to the alt-right story, in the sense that, with the Bernie Bros, I think it really was like a few tweets that were kind of strung together, and it was also like some of them, like some of the ones that were deemed to be misogynistic were really in no way misogynistic. I mean, like there was one that referred to Hillary as a, lying shitbag or something, which is really not a gendered term, by the way. And it was also posted by a woman, as it turned out. So, and from this kind of stuff, they were stringing together this narrative, which was, I thought was completely ridiculous. With the Trump supporters, at least online, and I agree with you that, first of all, we don't know for sure, to what extent some of these people are really Trump supporters. We don't know how they correlate with Trump supporters in the real world, but I mean, at least the online behavior, there was a much stronger pattern. Also, the other thing that to me is crucial, so yeah, as you said, Bernie was asked about it. And what did he do? He basically said very clearly, if you're harassing people online, and if you're saying, misogynistic things, and if you're being a horrible person to others online, don't do this. I really do not want this kind of thing done in my name. I help neutralize it to a great extent.
I don't think it helped to neutralize it. I think I think it was a bone to throw to pundits who were like agitating for him to address the subject. I mean, him giving one quote. Him giving a quote is not going to affect the behavior of vast swaths of anonymous people online. I don't think it neutralized anything. I think I would have preferred for him to have questioned the premise of what he was being asked and say that's not valid. I mean,
maybe he should have. No, I mean, I think personally, I think if I was Bernie and if that question was posed to me, I would say, personally, I believe that all of this is very much exaggerated, and I'm not sure that these people are even my supporters. But if you are my supporter and you're doing this, this is really not what I want, and this is not what I'm about. Now, I mean, I don't know, did it help neutralize it? I mean, certainly not for the Hillary people who were pushing that meme, certainly not. And for the mainstream media, I think it did kind of help neutralize it in the eyes of. I mean, I see that you're looking at me skeptically, but I think it kind of did. So at least yeah. And Trump didn't do that. Trump seemed to be kind of
because I think Trump in his typical crude manner was questioning the premise of what he was being asked. I mean, he was saying that's stupid. I mean, why should I have to account for some random person's online activity who I can't verify and who you can't verify? I mean,
Yeah, well, eventually he did say, like would he, but it was really much too late. He said something like, yeah, like if you're a Ku Klux Klan person who supports me, I don't want your support. I think he should have said that many months earlier.
Okay, I mean, sure. I mean, and by the way, I agree. I agree with what you just laid out, meaning about the pattern of behavior being a lot more pronounced on the Trump and the Bernie end. So, I mean,
yeah,
I think that.
Can I just make one more really quick point? Because this also relates, you probably know that I've written about Gamergate, and I've kind of defended Gamergate from the charges of being a misogynist harassment mob. Now, were there people in Gamergate who you're laughing? Yeah, I mean, Gamergate is like, you mentioned Gamergate, and that's kind of inherently funny, I suppose. But,
It's so silly. I mean, and how it's the nomenclature of Gamergate has now been imported into the political context. So now everybody knows what gaslighting is and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but let me tell you what I think a big difference was, because I was on BBC Radio with Milo Yiannopoulos, and he was basically like, well, how can you, like, you defended Gamergate, why don't you defend the alt-right? And I will give you one really good reason why. Because, yeah, I mean, there were, certain people, there were these, there were people associated with Gamergate who were pretty nasty trolls, who did kind of go after people. The thing is that, other people who were kind of the more mainstream figures involved in Gamergate really went to some trouble to disassociate themselves from these elements. Gamergate actually set up a harassment patrol where they were like reporting people who were harassing, Gamergate foes on Twitter. And I mean, people inside Gamergate actually ended up being harassed and targeted by the same trolls. So that's a huge difference, because, yeah, I mean, the Gamergate was saying from the start, these are not Gamergate people. These are, third-party trolls who are very often harassing both Gamergaters and anti-Gamergaters, which I think is largely true. I mean, were there people within Gamergate itself who were pretty bad apples? Yeah, there were. I think that's very true. Some of them have migrated into the alt-right. But for the most part, I don't think that was the case. I think they were very emphatic about disassociating themselves from those nasty elements. I haven't seen that from the alt-right. I mean, I think the leading figures of the alt-right are these, are pretty awful people.
Okay, I mean, and I need to stipulate, because I know. Okay, and I need to, just declare this, because I know people will cynically misconstrue what I'm saying here. I agree with your denunciation of the alt-right, or what you just laid out there completely. I find the alt-right ideology, such as there is an ideology, I reject it completely. But people, of course, will try to, misconstrue what I've said, so I just need to say that for posterity. I just think it's necessary when discussing this stuff, and God knows I don't want to relitigate Gamergate at all.
No.
Although it's funny, apparently the Hillary campaign wants to relitigate it, because they posted something on their website about I can't even remember what it was exactly, but it was like in September. That woman, Brianna Wu's piece? Yeah, she's posted something about how I can't remember exactly what her point was, but it was like something injecting Gamergate into the presidential campaign. But I think whenever you're just discussing this stuff, it's crucial to bear in mind that Trump looks, the polls look pretty even at this point. There's been a dramatic shift toward Trump in the past week or two. He may well win on Tuesday, right? If he were to win, he would be getting the votes of something like 65 million people potentially.
Right.
And the number of people who are let's just stipulate, and I don't think this is true, but let's stipulate it anyway, that all the people sending out nasty messages and emails to Julia Ioffe and whoever, they're all Trump supporters.
Right.
So they're voting for Trump, right? Let's stipulate that. The percentage of that number relative to the number of people who are going to be voting for Trump is just infinitesimally small.
Of course, yeah. Well,
it's like 0.0000001%. So for that to be so dominant in the media coverage, I think that's inherently distorting. That's my basic point. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that in like that kind of to acquire a disproportionate amount of attention, certainly true. Um, so yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you there. I think that, I mean, I would also argue, and I think you would have to agree with me, I think that, highly active groups can have an influence on, many things, including a political campaign that is disproportionate to their numbers. So I think, yeah, I mean, it's a small group. I mean, the question is to what extent, I certainly wouldn't say that they set the tone, but I think that they do have an influence. I mean, like to give you just one example, you probably know who Ricky Vaughn is, right? If you've been following the alt-right, you must be aware of. I mean, not his real name, but this is a guy who was tweeting as Ricky Vaughn, and
yeah,
who eventually got banned from Twitter. And this is a guy who was like, MIT does this report on the top 200 influencers in presidential elections. And they calculate this, I think, by like the amount of times that someone's messages get, shared on Facebook or retweeted, like the amount of exposure, the amount of mentions. Anyway, so Ricky Vaughn, who is really pretty much kind of an overt Nazi sympathizer, I would say. I mean, he's tweeted stuff like, Hitler had no choice except submit to Jewish Bolshevism or perpetrate the Holocaust. And, if we don't allow Trump to carry out his policies, we're eventually going to face the same choice. I mean, that's the sort of stuff this guy tweets. This guy was, I think, something like number one, somewhere in the 130s on MIT's list of like 200 election influencers. I mean, is that a significant thing? I kind of think it is. Again, I mean, I think it's pretty unprecedented for a guy who's pretty much an overt neo-Nazi to end up in the top 200 election influencers online. So yeah, I mean, I think that they're few in numbers. I think their exposure, again, like pre-Hillary, and that was long before Hillary's speech. So, this is not related to Hillary getting them more than so yeah, I would.
I think
numbers, I think they're significant.
well, yeah, I guess it's significant. My point here has never been to say don't cover this particular phenomena. It's been
you
it's been to say
too much, and I probably
it's been to say exercise some judgment in the proportionality that you assign to it. That's been my point.
I think that's yeah. No, I don't disagree with you on that. So I think
the reason why I got like that, I think, has been elevated and has gained a lot of influence. Partially it's because there's just this element of organic, energy that would coalesce around him. And another part is because there weren't many avatars of Trump support. People who can be depicted as avatars of Trump supporters in media spheres while he's been running. So people who were on the fringes had to be elevated because the media needed somebody to point to as a representative example of who a Trump supporter was, and to use them as a surrogate. So if you had Romney running, right, you would have no trouble getting Republicans or elite conservative kind of media personalities to serve as sort of representatives of the Romney campaign. But you don't have that with Trump. So that it sort of necessitated the elevation of these, previously marginal figures.
Yeah, to some extent. But, also let me point out that one person who was kind of, one person from the more traditional kind of conservative movement who has been kind of in Trump's corner from the start of the campaign is Coulter, who, and the story that I hear is that he basically, his decision to make immigration the cornerstone of his campaign was basically inspired by Coulter's book, which became a bestseller, the Adios America book, which is basically like, how all these Mexicans are turning America into a third world hellhole, basically. And I think that it's pretty well documented that actually did inspire Trump. So I think, again, we're even like the more mainstream conservative figures who are close to the Trump campaign or kind of have these alt-right-ish overtones. And I mean, I think since then, Ann Coulter has kind of moved a lot closer to the alt-right. She had that, fucking Jews. How many fucking Jews do you think there are in America tweet? You know that story, right? Am I allowed?
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay. Right.
Okay, the point she was making in that tweet, as far as I recall, was, I mean, let's not even go down that road. I mean, it's not worth it.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at the entirety of Ann Coulter's recent stuff, I mean, I mean, she talks about the browning of America. I mean, these are not even like subtle racist dog whistles. This is really about as close as you can get to white nationalism without kind of overtly declaring allegiance to it. So, this is a figure who has very strong ties to the Trump campaign. This is, the woman who said that she would vote for Trump if he was going to perform abortions in the White House because, she just loves his position on immigration. So I think that's, again, I don't think that we should downplay. I mean, has it been played? I mean, again, like all of the 65 million people who are going to vote for Trump, no, or however many actually end up voting for him. I don't think most of them, I mean, he was not the first choice of the majority of Republicans. At the same time, most
a plurality though.
What?
He won a plurality of Republicans, so he was the first choice relative to every other candidate. So
sure, but it was still, I mean, it was a minority, like a plurality in a field of 17 candidates initially.
I mean, but he also got more votes than any Republican candidate ever in the primary.
Right, but I mean, I think still overall he got what, like 36% of the votes of all the people who voted.
No, more than it's something was 40 something. I think by the end of it, when most people dropped out.
But anyway.
Okay, but like he still got more votes than any Republican primary candidate ever in history. So.
Right, but I think that had more to do with like a lot of people. Wasn't a lot of that actually from non-Republicans in open primary states?
Not really. I mean, that was played up by conservative elites who wanted to like disassociate Republican members of the Republican Party from Trump. But no, because he won the closed primary in Florida, which was crucial. That was only Republicans, and the closed primary in Arizona, that was only Republicans. So that was just a bogus narrative propagated. And it didn't have to do with close primaries.
I want you to check that figure because I still think it's 36% overall. Now, of the people who are going to vote for him on Tuesday, however many it ends up being, I think if you look at the numbers where they specifically ask, are you voting for Trump or against Hillary Clinton? You will find that the majority of them are saying that they're voting against Hillary Clinton. There's a pretty low level of enthusiasm for Trump. I mean, like the people that I know personally who are going to vote for Trump, and some of them actually are like these, elderly Russian Jewish immigrants. They will just basically say, yeah, I really don't like him, but at least he's better than Hillary because I really don't like her. So that's pretty much like the stuff that I'm hearing. I think that a lot of people, like, I will tell you, like, my personal experience with like people that I have spoken to, alt-right trolls who are voting for Trump. My impression is that a lot of them basically have like this fantasy Trump that they have, concocted in their head, who doesn't really exist in reality, where somehow like the only things he says in their view that he really means are the things that they happen to agree with, and the rest of it is just, stuff for show that he doesn't mean. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that a lot of this, again, I certainly would not say that the majority of people who are voting for Trump are alt-right by any means. They're not white nationalists, certainly. I think that there is a certain contingent, as I said, like of these core voters in the primaries who, if you look at the surveys, kind of do come close to white nationalist type ideas. In terms of the general population, I think it's a combination of people voting against Hillary, people who think that, we have a really bad choice, but, at least Trump is not Hillary, and, people who have this fantasy Trump in their head. I mean, I had someone tell me the other day, go ahead, sorry, I'm hogging too much time. And now I cannot hear you for some reason.
Okay, I'm back,
Now
right?
Okay, now I'm hearing you. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I mistakenly muted myself for a second. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely true that both candidates are extremely unpopular by historical standards, and both of them are using the argument that their opponent is worse to their advantage.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Actually, Hillary is now less popular than Trump, if you can believe it. At least according to the ABC Washington Post poll, but they were roughly equally unpopular.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's funny because I've been going around these different kind of battleground states, and I have not met a single person under 30 yet. Just out in public at different, So if you go to a Hillary campaign event, you're going to find people under 30 who are like somewhat enthusiastic about her. But just in normal conversations with people on at different venues, I have yet to find a single person under 30 who is actually enthusiastically voting for Hillary. I mean, the people who are voting for her are doing it very tepidly and almost entirely because they want to stop Trump.
I agree with you.
Whereas I have just again, it's a skewed sample size because it's just my own personal anecdotal experience. But just in randomly encountering people, I have found younger people under 30 who are, they hate Hillary obviously, but what's impelling them to vote for Trump is an affinity for Trump. So
what is this?
I don't know. That's just my own personal experience thus far.
Right. Well, okay. I will tell you that I've run into a number of people. This isn't anyone that I know in real life, but I know several people online who are who are young people voting for Trump and who are really enthusiastic, to some extent at least, about Trump. And in the case of these people, the motivating factor basically is political correctness. They feel that, the politically correct culture has gotten completely out of control, and, they hate identity politics. They hate, the sort of the dominance of the sort of social justice warriors in popular culture and, and in kind of geek culture. Some of these people, by the way, are Gamergaters or ex-Gamergaters. And I think that is a real thing. I think I'm actually, as it happens, I am currently working on a piece, which I'm really hoping to put up tomorrow because, otherwise it's going to be a little late. But it's a piece about, why I think it's really why Trump is not going to stop political correctness, and in my opinion is actually going to make it worse if he does get elected. So I mean, I think that the people who are voting for him for that reason are really, really wrong. But I mean, I understand the impulse, and I mean, I'll be the first to say, by the way, that I think the cultural left, the sort of the social justice people, bear a lot of responsibility for the rise of these, the white male identity politics that we're seeing. I mean, I don't think that, I still don't think that it's a good excuse for, sending swastikas to Jewish journalists. But on the other hand, if you've had the experience of, people in your online interactions repeatedly telling you to shut up because you're a cis white male, eventually you're going to say, oh, well, hey, here's someone who's standing up for cis white males. Great. He's my guy. So, I think that's understandable. I mean, I think it's highly diluted, but
yeah, I think in any presidential election, and maybe this one in particular, but you'd see it in previous cycles. People imbue their vote with significance that's sort of separate from the candidate, him or herself. So, for example, think back to 2008 with Obama. He was famously seen as sort of like a blank slate onto which people could project all their hopes and desires. And I think I think that was a little. I mean, I think the extent to which that was the case was a little exaggerated, just to demonize people who were Obama supporters, as I was.
Okay.
But so you see that even with Trump now, people people will kind of concoct their own little theory about how to counteract political correctness, and then
right,
and then somehow graft that onto Trump, and then justify internally their vote that way.
Yeah, of course.
So I mean, I think.
Well, what about the people that you've spoken to who were people under 30 who were pro-Trump? What was their explanation? Like, what was their motivation?
The main it's always some variation of he tells it like it is, which I guess actually feeds into the political correctness thing. Like he speaks, he speaks his mind. He doesn't give an F. I mean. That's the main thing that's
the anti-PC backlash. That's definitely the anti-PC backlash. And I mean, I find it really ironic, this whole kind of he tells it like it is thing, because I've thought about there was a really interesting poll that showed that people think that a lot of people were kind of rate Trump as being more honest than Hillary. Which I think is, on one level, it's really bizarre because, I certainly don't think Hillary Clinton is honest. But I mean, on the other hand, I mean, Trump basically tells like 5 pathological lies every day.
Well, because here's why people say that, I think, because so Hillary and Trump both tell lies on a pretty frequent basis, right? But the quality or character of their lies is different, and I think the quality of Hillary's lies kind of amplifies her as a liar to maybe a greater extent than Trump with some segment. So Hillary's lies are always very calculated. So she's a lawyer. She's a lawyer, right? So she's purposely deceiving people about her criminal investigation or other things, or she kind of like finagling her way very craftily out of various hang-ups. So those are sort of like more lies that people sort of traditionally associate with politicians, whereas Trump, if Trump look at it, if you just like transcribe like a paragraph of Trump, you could find like 2 clauses in the same sentence that are kind of mutually contradictory.
Right.
So it's just like a verbal blather, or like a verbal what is it? A word salad. So like, and it doesn't have quite the same resonance as just a very identifiable lie in the way that Hillary's lies do. Because like, for example, here's the one thing with Hillary, right? So Hillary, you can go look at this interview that she gave in July of 2015. That I've been trumpeting for a long time, just to use as like a perfect example of her lies. So she was asked in a CNN interview on TV in July 2015 about what was the status of the email investigation that at that time had just started. So the interviewer said, "Didn't you delete your emails after receiving a subpoena?" And she just said, "I'd never had a subpoena." Now that was just factually, that was just a lie. Like an incredibly blatant lie. She did receive a subpoena. We have documentary evidence of her having received a subpoena. So for her to just say, "I never received a subpoena,"
Okay.
I mean, that's just an incredibly blatant lie. Whereas with Trump, yeah, he'll have some incredibly blatant lies like that, but it's more often something like it's more often just him on these stream of consciousness rambles that aren't grounded in fact always. So I mean,
Right.
that's
Well,
sort of a way,
well,
that's sort of a way to parse it. But it's just like it's just that there's a different quality to their lies that I think kind of leads people to varying impressions of them.
right. Well, and I think also to some extent, I think like Trump's lies are often so like incredibly blatant and obvious that I think they're perceived as more kind of performative and more like a variety of trolling basically than they are as actual lies. You know, like when
Yeah, I agree with that.
said, yeah, like when he was asked about the whole birther thing, and his response was, his response essentially was that, well, you know, I actually think I did President Obama a favor because, you know, Hillary started this rumor and, you know, I was the one who brought it to a close by like forcing an investigation. Now, everyone knows, of course, that you know, was not his motive, you know, and not only that, but I mean, I think there's a lot of evidence that people have
But that wasn't really a classic lie, though. That was like his warped interpretation, his warped serving interpretation of what he had done. It's not like a lie is when like you knowingly make a false claim.
It's an interpretation that's pretty clearly dishonest. I mean, especially since I think
yeah, it's like a breed of honesty up flat out lie in the way that people can look at a Hillary claim and say, "Oh, that's just a lie." I mean, I think that's why it's perceived.
Yeah, but you know, people also
people
did actually dig up tweets that he sent out after the like the long form birth certificate was produced, and people did like dig up the fact that even after that, Trump sort of sent out several tweets that still continued to question you know, whether Obama was born in Kenya. So I mean, when he even to that extent, I mean, him saying that, you know, yeah, I kind of helped put it to rest and that was it, is not really true because he continued to raise it after that. So I think it was a lie in that sense.
But something is a lie. I mean, something is a lie is a lie is you have a sentence on a page, right? And the purpose of the lie is to knowingly instill false information that you know to be false. So I think with Hillary, Hillary's saying she never received a subpoena when we know she received a subpoena, and she's a lawyer, so she's intimately familiar with all the aspects of receiving a subpoena. I mean, that lie is just so blatant and straightforward that it's of a different quality than Trump to kind of like giving the self-serving explanation of his birther crusade, which I agree was repulsive. And I like back in 2011, I can remember saying, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he successfully kind of brought the issue to the fore, I guess. But yeah, that was always contemptible that he did that.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, actually, I mean, that was like his the way that he handled that issue in this campaign, to me, was kind of really one of the worst things about the whole Trump candidate.
Yeah, but then there was this. I mean, so I want to talk a little bit more about Hillary in particular and Hillary's supporters, right? Because I've noticed that, you know, liberals love to accuse the right, with some justification, of being of inhabiting this bubble of epistemic closure, right? So they're impervious to facts, and they're uniquely dismissive of information that contradicts their pre-existing beliefs, right? So when Trump issued his farcical statement saying, "Okay, now I do really believe that Obama was born in the U.S." What was that, September or something?
Yeah. Okay.
And he brought up the fact that Sidney Blumenthal, Hillary's longtime confidant, was involved in seeding some of these rumors. There was this ferocious pushback on the part of liberals to say, "No, it never happened." Blah 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 blah. Sidney Blumenthal is wonderful. I mean, this is just. I mean.
Yeah. Does anyone?
But no. We have evidence. We have evidence that the Clinton campaign was involved in, if not propagating the birther theory itself, propagating, you know, ancillary theories that were connected to the birther theory. And we have evidence that Sidney Blumenthal individually, who was a senior paid advisor to the 2008 Hillary primary campaign, went around to reporters and said, "Hey, go to Kenya and investigate whether Obama was born there." I mean, so yeah, he wasn't. Sidney Blumenthal wasn't going around saying, "Where's the?"
I mean, there was one guy who claimed that. Has anyone else? Because as far as I know, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it was the guy from McClatchy.
It wasn't a claim. I mean, he produced corroborating evidence to show that happened, and he was the Washington bureau chief of McClatchy at the time,
right.
Or he was the bureau, and he's the Washington bureau chief of McClatchy, which is one of the most reputable news outlets in the country.
Right, yeah.
So it's not just like a guy on the street making a claim.
No, I didn't know that. But so he did actually produce evidence?
He produced corroborating evidence that, and the reporter who was sent confirmed his account of what happened.
Okay.
But the point is, like, so why can't you acknowledge that to be true? Why do you have to go? Why do the Clinton loyalists have to just deny that factual reality?
Oh yeah. No,
I mean, you can still point to Trump's birther crusade as contemptible without denying the reality that Sidney Blumenthal was engaged in this insidious conduct.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Yeah. No, I certainly, I agree with you there. I mean, I think there is a lot of, there is a certain degree of epistemic closure. I think that, to some extent, that's probably true of anyone involved in political partisanship. I mean, I think that when you look at, for instance, things that are written by Matthew Iglesias, I think that this is a guy who would probably defend Hillary. I mean, you kind of do get the feeling that he'd defend Hillary if she strangled a puppy on live TV.
But but it's especially damning for liberals to partake in it because
because liberals are supposed to be the ones who are
I mean, they love to portray themselves as objective and they love to portray themselves as objective and fact-based and just into empirical reality, and then when it serves their political purpose, they deny empirical reality, and you see it now with these prominent pundits and media personalities just straight up denying the fact that there's even an FBI criminal investigation happening into Hillary's email server. I mean,
right.
There are mountains and mountains of evidence confirming that it's underway, but they'll deny it. And you had when the evidence is looking them in the face. I mean, it's been mind-boggling over the past 2 weeks. And the same thing with the Clinton Foundation criminal probe, which we know is underway based on multiple news reports quoting directly people who are aware of the probe. So
right. Well, I mean, it's kind of confusing because there is also a lot of kind of bullshit out there, and I think the bullshit kind of gives people an out to dismiss the valid information as well. I mean, that Brett Baier on Fox had to retract the story that he did on the Clinton Foundation probe.
Yeah, but that was misportrayed as well. He didn't retract the statement. What he did was he reasserted what was the core claim in his initial report. I mean, go back and look at it. Don't take my word for it. What he initially reported was that there's an active, ongoing criminal investigation into the Clinton Foundation. Now, he didn't retract that claim. He reasserted it when he went back on TV and clarified it. What he did retract was, and what he said, what he inartfully phrased, was the notion that indictments are imminent or could be imminent related to the probe. But then what the Clinton loyalist crowd did was say that they tried to depict it as Brett Baier retracts his entire report. No, he didn't.
No, of course not. Yeah.
And they'll use that to say that there's no Clinton Foundation FBI probe when you have the Wall Street Journal copiously reporting on it, CNN copiously reporting on it, other sources, and it's just the straight up denial of factual reality that they love to criticize the right for doing, but they're doing the same exact thing themselves. I just had a Twitter exchange with this guy Mark Amender who got caught doing these flattering email exchanges with Hillary's henchman Philip Raines. Now he's back and he's out denying that there's an email server investigation underway. I mean, that's just bonkers to deny that. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of reports confirming it at this point. So it really is. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I certainly am not going to challenge you on that. I think that there's a lot of people in the Clinton camp who are, who really do not want to hear anything negative. I think like the attacks on Nate Silver have been pretty ridiculous. The whole.
So I haven't even been following that because I've like the people are so obsessed with polls. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so
Yeah, and
I've sort of tuned it out. But like, what are they saying that he's too favorable to Trump now?
okay. So Ryan Grimm from the Huffington Post did a piece today, basically saying that
Nate Silver is rigged. Nate Silver is rigged.
Nate Silver is kind of skewing the polls or skewing the poll analysis in Trump's favor, that he's sort of elevating. I mean, he was basically, because, HuffPo rates Trump's chances of winning at like 5% right now, which, did you know that?
They still have it at 5%?
Yeah, they still have it at 5%.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, they still have it at 5%. And,
I mean, well, they're idiots. I mean, they should be I mean, they thought they were so clever for, remember, they say, oh, Trump, we're going to put Trump in the entertainment section.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then they had to go back on that.
They still use that disclaimer with every single article mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, what's the point of that? That's just preening. I mean, that's just like.
Yeah, of course, yeah, and I mean, it's at this point, it's really ridiculous. Like, So Ryan Grimm wrote a piece saying that Nate Silver is skewing the polls in Trump's direction, and that their estimate is the correct one.
And I love that because remember, so when Hillary was substantially ahead, and you had these like marginal right wing Twitter personalities like complaining about how the polls were skewed, they would be mocked relentlessly. And now that the situation is flipped, Nate Silver's rigged.
Yeah, Nate Silver's rigged. Nate Silver's skewing the polls in Trump's direction, and I think the gist of his complaint was that he believed that Nate Silver is sort of including unreliable polls, or he's sort of his adjustments for margins of error are incorrect. So it's that sort of stuff. So yeah, and then Nate Silver.
I mean, I just hate the constant back and forth like between. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So Nate Silver responded with a tweet storm this afternoon that began with something like, this article is fucking irresponsible, and then it just kind of all went downhill from there. So he was.
Yeah, I always have liked Nate. I mean, he's sort of. I mean, he has he's open to criticism, and I think he's got a little too establishment lately. Right. But I mean, he knows what he's talking about.
Right.
I just hate this obsession with like parsing every individual poll and having a debate about which one we should believe, and it consumes so much media energy that should be directed elsewhere.
The other thing that I don't really get, like, what is the point of telling your readership that Trump has a 5% chance of winning, which at this point is really just manifestly untrue? I mean, that's like kind of like the classic, ostrich head in the sand tactic. And I mean, we all know that, come Tuesday, we're going to know what reality actually is. And, I mean, given that there is a chance that Trump may win, I think it's like, to claim that the is only 5% is really not fair to your readership, because you're maybe setting them up for a pretty hard fall, because they're like, if you like, basically they're setting a lot of people up to feel that if Trump wins, to feel that like basically the unthinkable has happened. And I think
and another irony in that is say like you only read the Huffington Post and you only get your information about the odds of the outcome based on whatever projection they have.
Any person who does that, but.
Yeah, but like, so you might be less likely to even go out and vote if you think Trump is only a 5% chance of winning. Whereas if they put it at 50-50, you're going to say, "Oh, I better get my butt over to the poll and vote."
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic, because both Obama and Hillary, on the stump in the swing states, I mean, they have been pushing the message that, you better take this seriously because Trump may actually win. And I mean, I would think that this is, obviously you don't want to send the message that, oh my God, we've lost, because then a lot of people are going to stay home and not vote because
and as of today,
to say that it's 50-50, I mean, that's not going to depress your turnout. If anything, it's the opposite. And I mean, and Nate Silver isn't even putting it at 50-50. It's like, 65, 30, 35, I think, at this point. So, yeah, I mean, this backlash against Nate Silver, I think, is ridiculous. And, I'm not even sure. I mean, I'm trying to figure out, like, what purpose does this actually serve?
I think Trump's odds are probably higher. I don't know. I mean, I don't. There's some people who just sit and like refresh 538 every 5 minutes, and like that's how they spend their day. I mean, I think there are more productive ways to spend my time, so I don't really do that. But I would, my kind of just, I don't know, a back of the napkin projection at this point would be the Trump is probably 5% chance to win. You're 51. I don't know, somewhere in that range, because momentum are on his side completely, and it seems, with 3 days, less than 3 days left, you see how the trend lines can reverse dramatically in Hillary's favor.
Well, I think that the momentum has shifted a little bit, like over the past 24 hours. I think there are.
I don't know. I mean, some of that's going to be statistical noise, but if you look at the trends, there hasn't really been much of a shift. I mean, RCP basically, like the RCP aggregate, which I think is pretty reliable, shows Clinton's lead as stabilizing. So, I don't know. It's I'm getting a sense that the momentum may have shifted a little bit in her favor again, but who knows? I don't know. Well, I mean,
listen, we're discussing something that we're going to know the answer to in like 2 days, and then the thing is that, the result is, we're never going to know like what the actual odds were, because at that, I mean, it's possible for someone to win even if he only has a 5% chance of winning. So, at that point, it's all going to become completely academic. And we're not going to go around talking about, well, he actually had only a 20% chance of winning. Well,
I mean, it's fruitless, and people spend so much. I mean, people spend so much of their time debating polls that it's so stupid. At the same time, there is useful information to be gained from polls. It's just as with most things in life, it's the way that it's just the emphasis you place on it, and the and your level of kind of circumspection about it. I should note that the much discussed LA Times USC poll, which obviously has an atypical methodology, but which did virtually perfectly predict Obama's margin of victory in 2012, now has Trump outside the statistical realm of uncertainty. So they now say, as of today, that Trump has a 95% chance, or they would project, based on the polling results today, with 95% confidence that Trump would win the popular vote. So he's at his highest point ever in that poll. And if you look at the trend lines in the LA Times poll, what it's generally done is been predictive of what would happen later on in the other polls. And it's tracked basically with the polling average that, like you would see on Real Clear Politics, but it's been sort of like up a little bit ahead of the curve in kind of foretelling.
I'm not sure you're right about that, because I mean,
no, that's true. It's true.
As much as I'm kind of knocking the polls, I actually do watch them, and I think, I mean, I think the LA Times poll kind of consistently showed Trump ahead, except for once, like right after the pussy tape came out.
No. I mean, it had Hillary ahead in August. It had Hillary ahead in October. But I'm saying the trend lines in the LA Times poll. So yeah, it's had a pro-Trump. It's had a bias for Trump. But I'm saying the movement of the trend lines in the LA Times poll have tracked with the movement in the trend lines for the other polls. So I don't know. Again, it's all
who knows?
academic.
It's all going to be academic pretty soon. So
Yeah. All right. Well, why don't we wrap up there? We've been going for a while here, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks.
But yeah, this was it. Hopefully
I've
people.
seen a couple of other people complain, by the way, that my voice is like coming through at really low volume on YouTube. So I don't know what's going on there. You can hear me fine, right? I mean, you can hear me.
I can hear you fine. I don't know. I think when there's crosstalk, maybe my voice comes through, and then that might be it. I don't know.
Okay. So is this going to be available like to watch after this, or is it just a
right when I press stop, it archives automatically and it's available for all time. Right. So it's at the same link that was tweeted out.
Right. Okay, well, I'll be able to check it out for myself then. Okay,
all right.
Thanks very much.
All right.
I enjoyed this. And
nighty night.
Good luck. Enjoy the rest of the campaign.
Okay, you too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.